going to start doing that on Sundays because some of you have asked. All right. Let's pray. And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord our God, our wisdom, our salvation. Amen. Light. Light is a fascinating thing. It's obvious to say without light we see nothing. But light has a lot of fascinating properties, and there's a lot of interesting things about light. It's quite an amazing thing to think about the fact of how many plants turn light into food, right? Trees and all kinds of other plants, they absorb everything that the light of the sun has to give them, and by that, they manufacture food. We need light, not just to see. People who are sheltered from the light for long periods of time tend to get vitamin D deficiency unless their diet contains enough vitamin D. But our skin, go out in the summertime. Oh, I can't wait. Go out in the summertime on a nice sunny day, or even a sunny day that's cold, even on your hands and face, and your skin absorbs the light and produces something that we all need. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. Certain things can slow down light if they get in the way. It's interesting that fog will slow down light, but the amount is so infinitesimally small, there's no way you and I can measure it. But when you think about driving, which often involves split-second decisions, it's much different driving with your headlights on a foggy road than when it's clear. Light travels it takes a little over 8 minutes for light from the sun to hit Earth. So when we look at the sun up in the sky, that light we're seeing left the sun 8 minutes earlier. The closest star to us is Proxima Centauri. It's 4.24 light years away. That means that if you go out at night and you can find Proxima Centauri in the sky and you can see its light, that light you're seeing left that star 4 years and 3 months earlier. And that doesn't even come close to the stars that are even farther away, that their light, we see their light, and the light left that star thousands of years ago, and now we're just beginning to see its light. Isn't it interesting to think about the fact that when we look into the heavens at night, and even the astronomers with those high-powered telescopes, that they can see things you and I can't see with the naked eye, that we see the universe in our moment not as it is, but as it was. We never see the universe in present time. And so light is an amazing thing. The Bible talks a lot about light. In Genesis, it's the first thing God creates, and God said, "Let there be light." That's before the sun and the moon are even created. Genesis isn't interested in the order of creation. It's trying to make a point. But the point is, the first thing that God says is, "Let there be light." God's revelation is light. Everything we know about God has been revealed by God. You know, it's like walking into a room in the middle of the night in a dark room that you don't know with furniture. We know what happens there. Then all of a sudden you flip on the switch and everything can be seen. God's light reveals the character of God. light also refers to the holiness of God. For those who have been following our devotions in a year, we read the story where Moses goes up the second time to Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, because he came down the first time, and remember, the children of Israel were having a lot of fun partying with that golden calf, and so Moses threw down the first tablets and broke them because he was so angry. So he goes up the second time to get 10 Commandments 2.0, and he comes down off the mountain, and we're told that his face is shining so brightly because he's been in the presence of God. And in fact, his face is shining so brightly the people can hardly look at him. He's so bright. And so when he's talking to the people, he has to put a veil on. Because God is holy. And no one can be in the presence of the pure holiness of God and survive, because we human beings are anything but holy. Oh, we're hoping to move in that direction by the grace of God and by the presence of the Spirit, but to be in the pure holiness of God is just not something human beings can stand. Moses wants to see God's presence, and God says, oh, you can't see my presence in that way, but you can get a glimpse of it. And so, right, and we get that wonderful hymn, he hides my soul in the cleft of the rock. So God takes Moses, puts him in the cleft of a rock, and just lets him see a glimpse of his presence. And on this Transfiguration Sunday, we reflect upon Jesus on the mountain in that wonderful glimpse of God's glory as Jesus is transfigured. And for the Apostle Paul, light is a central image for Jesus Christ. We read in Paul all the time, it's the light that shines out of darkness that's given us glory in Jesus Christ. In Ephesians, he has this wonderful little line where Paul says, wake up, O sleeper, wake up from the dead, O sleeper, and Christ will shine on you. And so for Paul, Jesus represents, as much as is possible in this existence, the holiness of God, the light of God, the transforming power of God is seen in Jesus Christ. But Paul recognizes something in our lesson. It isn't just that we who are believers in God struggle to be in the presence of God's holiness because we fall short of that holiness, but for Paul, the world is in darkness and does not get to participate in that holiness. And so Paul writes, and he says in verse 4, it is God who said, let light shine out of darkness, who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But even before that, he says, and even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. This gospel, this light, this magnificent light of the gospel, this magnificent transformation that has come to us in Jesus Christ is veiled in this world, just like Moses had to veil himself before the people. And Paul says this is not accidental. It's the god of this world. For Paul, it's the principalities and powers. It's the demonic. It's evil, whatever term you want to use. That is purposely trying to blind the people from this great light of salvation that God offers. It's quite amazing to think of the fact that this special light, we all know there's light, by the way. You know there's light that we can't see, we human beings. There's different kinds of light. It's light that some insects can see, some animals can see that kind of light. And I think there's an analogy here that there is this light of the gospel that is just not shining through because the principalities and powers, although they've already been defeated in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, refuse to give up. They're stubborn. It's like the Chiefs after the Super Bowl last week, playing a fifth quarter all by themselves because if we have one more quarter, we can win it. They refuse to give up. And they're doing much damage. And so the light is being veiled from so many. But how interesting it is that Paul then moves into, he keeps going and he wants to say, but we don't proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ. And this is that passage a lot of people know about, the treasure in clay jars, right, where Paul says we have this treasure of this light. It's like the light is in us, but there's a bottle cap over it, and you can't see it. It's twisted tight, and you can't see it. We hold the wonderful, holy light of God in us, even though we are not holy, even though we are not eternal, even though we are fragile. We're like clay jars, clay pots, that if you knock it off of the counter, it shatters. And Paul wants to say to the Corinthians, we who are so frail and have so many foibles, that God, through the power of the Spirit, has put the light of the gospel in us. And we can do something that the principalities and powers have no power to keep us from doing. And that is, we get to lift the lid and shine that light. As often as we get it wrong, as often as we fall short, as often as it just things, our lives, we don't sometimes do what we should do. In the midst of the frailty, these clay jars, body, mind, and spirit, God has chosen the clay jars to lift the lid in the world and proclaim the light. Paul says, after our scripture lesson in verse 7, but we have this treasure in clay jars so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. And then he goes on. We're afflicted in every way but not crushed, perplexed but not driven to despair, persecuted but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed. And so while the rest of the world is blinded by the light of Christ, in the midst of the darkness, we get to be flashlights. We have one of those battery-powered lights you charge. It's in our kitchen if the power goes out, right? And every time the power goes out, pew, everything else is dark. But boy, the kitchen is lighted, which is good because the refrigerator's there. And the food is there. And that's the image. That in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of the lack of direction and purpose, we, as imperfect as we are, as clay vessels, we get to shine the light. So there's a story about one of the old revivals, the old tent revivals, revival preachers, and in a small little town in the south somewhere, and people had gathered together for the 3 or 4 night revival. And of course, every night the tent would have chairs and it would be filled with people, and the revival preacher would be getting up there preaching a sermon and then calling for the invitation. And one night this couple goes to the revival. She's a believer. He's not really into the faith too much, never really went to church much with her, really wasn't a real nice guy, but he went with her. And so the preacher is preaching, and he's got this revival, and he's preaching, and this man's heart is touched. He's hearing this, and he's moved. And finally, at the end, near the end of the service, the preacher calls for all of those who want to accept Jesus to come to the altar. And he gets up out of it. He's so moved and he's so emotional. He gets up and he's running down the center aisle there under the tent and running down on the brown grass. And he's shouting, "Fill me, Jesus! Fill me, Jesus! Fill me, Jesus!" And all of a sudden, the voice comes from the back of the tent. His wife says, "Don't do it, Lord! He leaks!" We leak. We have this treasure in clay jars. We leak. But you know what? We can still lift the lid, and we can shine the light. Even a little bit of light in the midst of the darkness can be seen. And we all know that in the midst of darkness, our natural inclination is to move toward the light. And so we lift the light. We shine our flashlights, even when sometimes the batteries just seem low, our spiritual batteries, because we know that those in darkness can see what's even at times very dim. And how amazing it is that God can use the light of Jesus that I shine even when that light is so dim. God can use it. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, "A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." You're down in that valley of darkness and you look up and you see that city. Oh, it looks so inviting. I want to be there. It's dangerous in the valley where it's so dark. But there's the lighted city. It looks like a warm, inviting place. We are that city on a hill. And may we shine our light in the valleys of this world so that all can see the light of Jesus. Let us pray. Gracious God, you work your will in this world through the ordinary things. And how grateful we are that we, your people, who are going on to perfection, who are going on to holiness, still discover that in the midst of the transformation of salvation, we still find ourselves to be broken. We still know that we leak. And yet we also know that you are able to use us. That we don't have to be perfect to let that light shine. Oh, yes, it does matter when we fall short. We can hide the light by our deeds. But we also know that earthen vessels that are fragile and frail, can still be used. And you use each and every one of us. So help us in this day, in all that we say and all that we do, to lift the lid of our lives and shine a little bit of the light of Jesus on this Transfiguration Sunday. In his precious, holy, and bright name we pray. Amen.
us with grace.